Hey guys, welcome to the first episode of Player Level 4, a weekly podcast dedicated to taking your game to the next level. This is a new name for us, but we've got the same feel that you've come to love and enjoy. As always, I'm Kit, and here's Fox.
Hey guys, the new name sounds so much better. It really does. We thought it might be a good idea to polish things up a bit and live up to the quality that ForgeWatch is known for now, that we're part of their team.
That's right. Over the next few weeks, you should be seeing a lot of new things from us. We've been noticing your requests on the forums. We've started adding fancy indicators so you know who's talking. Next week, we should have a bar over to the side. We just got a whole bunch of things to introduce you to as time goes on.
Speaking of those chat indicators, they really do look nice. Kit, good job. Let's give everyone a chance to see the other ones you made by introducing our guests this week. I'm sure you guys have heard about this guy's first place finish in last week's standard constructed tournament, so welcome back, Ragerin. Aside from first place finishes, what else have you been up to?
Oh, a lot of things. Aside from work, I've been working really hard on the core set review, a gigantic 4-part piece going faction by faction and giving every card in the set a 0 through 5 rating, where 0 is what I consider unplayable and 5 being something that you should probably play every single opportunity that you get. Other than that, I just published my tournament report and deck tech for the spells deck that I played during the constructed tournament. That's pretty much what I've been up to.
Yeah, well, great job last weekend, Ranger, and it was really nice to see you, say that you thought you broke the meta and then you went ahead and did it. It's a shame that you're not going to be able to play this weekend. I know you've been brewing a really cool deck. Maybe we'll see it the week after. But also with us this week, to celebrate our induction to the ForgeWatch cult, we have the owner and founder of ForgeWatch with us today, Racecar. That kind of makes you my boss, though, doesn't it? Can I call you boss?
Kit, don't get us kicked out. Sorry, Racecar. Want to tell us about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I am the man behind the curtain, as it were, at ForgeWatch. I'm essentially in charge of making sure that all of the content gets published and that we're keeping tournaments running for the community and making sure that the writers have all of the feedback that they need to make sure that they're producing the best possible content for everyone out there in the community. So this means that I have to kind of keep a pretty good pulse on what's going on in SolForge and just try to make sure that everything that we're doing is relevant at the time. So this is actually, the main reason why I asked you guys to come on board was because I feel like what you're doing here in this podcast is a really great contribution to the community, and I think it's something that's going to prove really, really valuable in the years of SolForge to come.
Well, I'm definitely glad for that feedback. I'm sure Fox is too. Speaking of other good things, I heard you ran a tournament this last weekend, one of the largest ones that we've ever had. How was hosting that? With how big it was, you think that's going to influence future ForgeWatch events?
Certainly, yeah. Running that tournament was a ton of fun. Interestingly enough, it was not the largest tournament that ForgeWatch has run in the past, but it was a really huge turnout. We had 70 participants in that constructed event, and it's just really, really great information for us. Right now, kind of what we're doing on the ForgeWatch tournament organizing side of things is we're trying out a lot of different formats, a lot of different times, mostly just trying to gather data and kind of get opinions about how we can better run events going forward into the future. Really kind of what future ForgeWatch events look like depends pretty heavily on what Stoneblade plans to do in their client design, not necessarily with their tournament structure and drafting structure, but more just, the capabilities of the client. Because obviously, the more fully featured the client, the more that we might be able to do things with it, as far as, whether or not we can spectate games, which is something that they've mentioned is, way down the line, as far as like creating better coverage for tournaments, a lot of those kinds of things. So what a tournament looks like coming from ForgeWatch is probably going to be pretty similar to what we're seeing now, at least for the foreseeable future. But as they continue to roll out features, we're also planning to incorporate some of those things in. And that's kind of, what we're looking at doing. And I think a lot of people are really happy with these tournaments that we're running. At least players always seem to give really positive feedback.
Well, from what I heard, that tournament was huge, and the feedback that I've seen on it was awesome. So it's really good to hear that we're going to have more tournaments coming along. And Ragerin over here, well, he got first in it. So I'm going to ask him a couple questions. And the first one, well, really the biggest one is, how did you feel going through that? And the other one is, what was your toughest matchup?
Well, I did go in pretty confident. Of course, had some jitters at the beginning. A 70-person tournament is, for SolForge, is actually really big right now, considering the player base. It's not the largest tournament that I've been in. I think the largest tournament I've played in was 1,200 people for Magic. But yeah, so going in, I mean, having deck lists available to look at is such an advantage for anyone who decides to actually go and use those. So I was very happy to see that I was getting matched up with a lot of these mid-range Necrium-based value decks that have a lot of like recurring creatures and a lot of removal, because I built my deck on the spells deck plays along a much different axis from a lot of other SolForge decks. The creatures are in there to supply an engine for your spells, specifically the Flame Shaper being the main damage engine. So there's not really a lot of targets for opponents' removal, and a lot of the value creatures are like shut down by Metasculpt or can just get locked down by Prison. So as I saw the match, what was actually succeeding these mid-range value decks, I felt pretty good because I kept on facing them. Although the toughest match was against Mr. Hyde, I believe is his name. He was playing Explosive Demise, which pretty much completely negates the Energy Prison as a way of locking down creatures. So in the first game, I actually overlooked it. I saw another mid-range Necrium matchup, and I was like, "Oh, this is gonna be great, no problem." And then game one, he smashed me by sacrificing like a couple of 15, 18 power Grimgaunts that I had just locked down and let grow, and he got me before I could really get going. So I had to switch up my strategy a bit, kind of ignore the energy prisons that I had been relying pretty heavily on, and focus on the card draw so that I would more consistently draw Flame Shaper and be able to actually kill all of his creatures before it would come to his turn, so he would always have nothing to sacrifice. And that got me there through games 2 and 3. But yeah, it was really great tournament. A lot of good experience, especially that finals match where, I'm pretty tired during that finals match, after 4.5 hours of play, and I actually went back and I was watching the video again and kind of smacking my head against my desk because of how many misplays I was making. Like, they're little misplays, but in that deck you really can't afford to mess up because you have no creature presence. So if you let things roll out of control, it can be hard to wrest that control back, and you end up taking a lot of damage in the early and mid game. So you have to be very careful. So yeah, learning moment there, but it was a lot of fun. I can't wait to do it again. I wish that I could play this weekend, but it's getting towards the end of summer here in Minnesota, and my volleyball season is actually closing up this weekend, so I'd like to play that last game with my guys. But I will definitely try to be getting into a lot of the future ones and hopefully be able to help shape the metagame some more.
Well, I'm glad that you're going to go have fun this weekend, so maybe this won't hurt you as bad as I thought it might, but we are here to discuss the meta, so I'm going to ask everyone, you already heard of Corpse Explosion? No. Unlikely Demise is one way
Explosive
to
Demise.
beat... whatever. One way to beat the Shapers, or at least attempt to. What else do you guys think is a good call against them? And also, if you were going to play in the Constructed Tournament this weekend, what would you be playing?
So honestly, I think it's just kind of funny that a lot of people are trying to find ways to beat the Shapers that doesn't include playing Shapers, and I think that's honestly a really huge mistake, at least right now, because I feel like any deck that you can make that's going to beat Shapers without playing them is actually probably made a million times better by actually playing them as well. So, yeah, I don't know that that's necessarily the answer that people want to hear right now, because everybody wants, something to break the something else. But, honestly, I feel like Shapers are really high value cards. They often get a whole bunch of value before your opponent can ever do anything about them. And I think because of that reason, they are extremely strong cards in the meta, which is, I think, something that everybody thinks right now. And there's good reason for it. And don't get me wrong, I don't think that this means that you can't beat a Shaper deck with a non-Shaper deck. I think that that's possible, but I think you're going to be a lot more consistent if you are playing Shapers, and that's what kind of appeals to me a little bit more, is that consistency. So, you know, there are a lot of different things that you can do with them. Me personally, you know, I've been eyeballing a Utera Tempest deck that's focusing on Shapers. I think it's particularly interesting. It's definitely different than the way the Alolan Tempest spells deck plays out. But that's kind of one that I'm looking at. I think there are a lot of really great advantages going that direction. But honestly, if I had to pick a deck that I would play this weekend, if I had the legendaries for it, which I'm currently missing a whole ton of them, I'd probably play bots. Because that's probably, I think, the deck that I have the most fun playing, and I think it's also pretty consistent. I mean, you get those Arclight squadrons out there just getting you free bots, and you can just fill up a board really, really quick with, you know, high armor creatures that are really tough to get rid of. So, you know, what I would play this weekend, I don't know. I often have to balance what I think is going to be the very best deck with what I think is going to be the most fun deck for me to play, and that's just kind of how I am with a lot of these games.
That's actually really interesting, because in my experience, bots itself is not actually very good against the Alolan Tempest Shapers deck, but what bots is good at is beating other Shaper decks, and also counters to like the Alolan Tempest Shaper deck. So that's actually that's a very interesting like meta call, because you know what's public enemy number one right now, so you know what people are going to try to do to beat it, so you try to beat them. And now we've got like the metagame circle going here. But you know, cards you want to look at for beating Shapers, specifically Alolan Tempest Shapers, Explosive Demise is a good one, though it can backfire, but Jetpack. I love Jetpack, and it was seriously underplayed, like severely underplayed. Seaman Reborn was playing a deck that had 3 Jetpacks, and I was so happy to see that he was completely on the other side of the bracket, and so I wouldn't need to face him till like this. I think I wouldn't have had to face him until the finals, if he had won all the way through. But a funny thing also about Seaman Reborn's deck was I had a friend, MN Paladin, who helped me test my Shapers deck, and he actually played the same 30 cards, maybe one different, and got paired against Seaman in that first round and was out of the tournament. So keep that in mind. But I do actually like Utera Tempest. Like, the big thing is about maximizing your Shapers. Like, how many procs can you get off the Shaper? Because the Shaper is a very high value card. And you really should be playing it right now, especially Flame Shaper. Because even if your opponent has a Flame Shaper out, you play your own Flame Shaper, you play 1, possibly 2 cards, now you've done a ton of damage to the board, and you have a board presence. The thing with the Shaper is that it comes into play and it gets immediate value. That's why it's so good. That's also one of the reasons why I kind of dislike activate effects right now, because you have to wait a turn, and that just means that your opponent can slam a Shaper, play a spell or two, and deal a ton of damage or even wipe your board. And that's just very dangerous. So I would suggest, look for maximizing how many triggers you can get off your Shaper, and also how well you can flood the field, because the more creatures that are on the field, the harder an opponent's Shaper has to work to remove all those creatures before you get your turn again.
Well, speaking of flooding the field, I've actually been working on a deck that does that. It is in the Utera Tempest spell style, which apparently all of us have been looking at. But I have actually been testing it on stream, so those of you who have seen that, it's a blast to play, and it's starting to get fairly consistent, and I'm starting to feel fairly confident as well. That's actually what I'm planning on playing in the tournament this weekend at this point in time, and it's a blast to play. I mean, I'm killing people with these tiny little seedlings that have gone completely out of control. And I know there's a lot of people who say, who are complaining about the Shapers being so prevalent, and I think that's actually a good thing, because it's a card that's at a rarity level that everybody has easy access to, and therefore it allows everyone to be more competitive because they have access to these powerful cards. And that, I think, is very important for having a healthy metagame.
I can agree to that to some extent. I mean, I wish that Flame Shaper in particular wasn't so suffocating. But with that in mind, I mean, as far as what to beat Shapers with, I think you want to get as many cards that are early pressure as possible, either the aggressive Tempest cards or cards that go over the Shapers. Like, I would love to apply early pressure on them to the point that they have to play their spells, level their spells early so they can't get multiple triggers off their Shapers. I had a lot of success against Shapers with my Mono Terra deck because the Avatar and Prowler are hard for them to deal with. Even going into level 2, a level 2 Prowler is still, 2 triggers have to hit it from a Flame Shaper. I mean, that's a level 1 creature or a level 2 creature that still requires 2 triggers and otherwise is dealing a huge amount of damage. I find those early aggressive cards really, really, really strong in the meta right now, especially against the Alolan version, because you give my guy Defender, I'm still hitting you for 6 or more on my turn every turn. You have to either kill it, get rid of it off the board, or you're taking it on your turn as well. What I would play this weekend is most likely Utera Tempes or Mono Utera, but I'd go the aggro version, not the spells version.
Well, those are some fairly solid choices. Most of us are leaning towards Utera right now, which is pretty interesting. But there was another tournament that was held this last weekend, and Kit, you hosted that, so why don't you go on about that a bit?
I did. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this was actually the largest ForgeWatch event we've had. Is that correct?
I believe so. Is this the one that had
88 people?
88, yeah.
Alright, so this was an Unheroic event, which is something I will be hosting every Friday for at least the foreseeable future. We've managed to square away that there's going to be an invitational on that as well as the normal constructed invitational. More details on that coming in the future. I really like this format. It gives people who are just starting out a chance to play and feel competitive. It gives people who have been playing a while a chance to be competitive without overwhelming other players. It allows the most access right from the get-go. People are calling this, I've seen in Steam chat, people call this the Shaper format. And, well, yes, you're playing Shapers because they're at the rare level, but they're not nearly as abusable as they are at the high level. I do want to point out that you don't have a lot of the free spells other than the surges at that rarity, but beyond that, the top 3 decks from the tournament, at most, the top 3 decks had 2 Dark Shapers. That's it. No Flame Shapers, no third Shaper. They all had 2 Shapers, the exact same 2 Shapers, and that was it. I think that that is amazing. I don't consider the Shaper format, regardless of what other people are saying. Having Shapers in your deck is not indicative at all about it being a Shaper format when that's the result you see. What I would like to point out is that over half the decks in the top 16 had 3 of Dryad in their deck. Not Dryad, Shardplate Delver in their deck. So it's actually interesting that in the top 16 there were more copies of Shardplate Delver than there were of a single other Shaper. But, let's get your guys' opinion. What do you guys think about the Shapers in Heroic? Are they as sky is falling as everybody's saying at the moment?
No. No, not at all. It's no. I kind of want to just leave it at that. Honestly, I don't think that Shapers are OP. I think they're good cards. I also don't think that they're necessarily shaping the environment. Haha, you'd be proud of that one, Radrin.
Oh my gosh.
But no, seriously, like honestly, the way that a card becomes overpowered in my view is if it starts creating just carbon copy decks all the time, which I don't think is the case currently. I think there are still, even if you're playing with Shapers, I think there are a lot of different decks that you can play and focus around. It's just Shapers are value cards, and it may get to a point where everybody just decides to settle on one, but we're not there yet, and especially in Unheroic, there are just a lot of really, really good decks that, may or may not happen to use them. So, as an example. I was playing some Unheroic matches the other day against Fantrich, who is Jeff Liu, game developer for Stoneblade, and he played a deck with 0 shapers in it, Unheroic deck I should specify, with 0 shapers in it, and was destroying everyone in the Steam chat. And it was really cool. It used Lightbringer Clerics, it used Volcanic Giants, and just kind of had this sit back, come at me kind of attitude. Because, like, if you don't come at him, then, you know, he's going to gain life and deal damage to you. So, I mean, it was just a really, really interesting kind of deck. And I think there are just a lot of really cool options out there with or without shapers. So, going back to what I said, no.
Yeah, Shaper's just not abusable in Unheroic. I've been looking at the format a little more, and it's so primarily creature based. Like, there's just there's really like no standout overpowered strategy that you can do. So you just want to be looking for value where it can be had. Large creatures, things that reproc. Like, I actually think that like Corpse Crawler and Deathseeker together are just like really good, because Corpse Crawler is just huge, and there's so many like just nice solid cards that you have access to that the shapers can't just like straight up deal with if you can't chain. So no, like shapers fine. It's a good rare, but it's not going to. You can't really have something shape the entire format around itself if it's not able to just control everything by itself.
Well, you all are very punny. I think we'll all appreciate that for a minute. But I do agree, they are in no way taking over the format. They are the most popular cycle of cards to play. So a lot of people are gaining that sort of negative experience from that. But just because they are the most popular and they are strong does not mean that they are, destroying the format. I feel that the format's pretty dang healthy for only having, half the set in it. And, it's a very small card pool, and it's a lot of fun. One of my favorite cards actually in the format is Necro Slime, because he's a boss. He gets out of hand. Yeah, he gets out of hand so fast at levels 2 and 3, and I think he's actually one of the most powerful cards you can play in the format right now.
I call him Slime Plate Delver.
Is he gobbling up the opposition?
Yes.
Actually, he's gobbling up your own friendlies.
Oh, that he does. For me, from what you've heard me say in the Steam chat, from what you've heard me say here, you probably already know how I feel about Shapers. I think they're good cards. I really loved what Racecar had to say. Yes, they're good cards. They're value cards. They do not dedicate you to a specific deck. You can put a Shaper in any card, a Shaper in any deck, and still have that deck perform well. The Shapers will add to it. That's what we call a staple. A card that, in standard constructed, it's a lot different. Like, you're using those shapers dedicatedly in very specific shaper-oriented archetypes. In these decks, it's not a shaper-oriented archetype, it's an archetype that has a shaper in it, because the shaper gives you value. It's not like the Packmaster of yore, where, you just threw Packmaster in the deck. Echo-Wisp Flowchart. Do you have Echo-Wisp? Yes, play Echo-Wisp. Those days are over. Those are an unhealthy metagame where literally 50% of the decks were going to be Packmaster, and anybody who wasn't playing Packmaster either had to plan to beat it or plan to lose against it. So I think things are a lot more healthy now. At least you have the ability to build more than one deck. You didn't really last meta.
Yeah.
Well, we're on the topic of tournament play. We did get some more information on how it's supposed to work, is specifically the client tournaments. With the instance, they said that they want it to be 3-round tournaments. You're not required to block out a specific amount of time for that. You can play a round, go to work, and then come back home and play your next round. And each round you're going to get paired against somebody of a similar record. And those prizes that you'll get are tied to your wins. So the more consecutive wins you get, the better prizes you will be rewarded with. And it is possible to go infinite. That is what they have said. One last important thing to note is they are leaning towards best of 1 matches over more other popular options such as best of 3. And this might impact how, the community tournaments are run, specifically, since ForgeWatch is running most of these, but it is good to note that that's what they're looking at right now.
Yeah, they announced a whole bunch of stuff. What's this I hear about a Shiro card, Fox?
Okay, well, they didn't say there was going to be a Shiro card, but I would be absolutely over the rainbow if there was a Shiro card, just because Shiro is awesome.
But they did make a white tiger card.
That's true.
That's true. There is a white tiger.
Well, a lot of what I'm going to say, everything I'm about to say is in the SolForge report, so I'm just going to touch on the competitive aspects, the things that are going to help you be competitive. For instance, matchmaking is going to come along in the next patch, alongside 20 new cards, draft and constructed tournaments. Matchmaking won't be set up with ELO like League of Legends is. ELO is bad for new players in card games because it starts you in the middle. They want to start you down at the bottom, so as you gain skill, you work your way up. I think that's a great idea because it prevents, that experienced player with all the legendaries from sitting around in that loser area, like the negative 200 or whatever era, and meeting up with all the new players simply by throwing games, and it just puts a bigger wall in between. I think that's a really good idea. The other thing is the rankings are going to be hidden with potential leaderboard implementation in the future. They said, that it's possible they'll give prizes out to leaderboards, but nothing's guaranteed yet.
I've actually got a couple more news stories. Not in this patch, but in the patch after that, they've confirmed that there's going to be both gifting and crafting, especially craft. Yeah, I know, right?
I know.
So especially crafting, I'm very excited about. As someone who's actually put some money into the game, I have a lot of extra cards that I have nothing I can really do with, and then there's going to be the free who a year down the road are going to have multiple play sets of all these commons and rares, and once again nothing to do with it, but we're going to be able to put those towards something. And they've also been looking at some other forms of trading / an auction house that they're looking to get done in December, but they've made no promises on any of those dates. As for alternate formats, they are going to be coming eventually, but just due to the fact that it's a new game, we have a new player base, we want to make sure that there's always people available to play. Those alternate formats are kind of just down the road, so you're gonna get your Unheroic, or maybe your Popper, or maybe your like Singleton Highlander style decks, but it's just not going to happen right now. So if you want to actually like compete with these alternate formats, you'll just have to wait for the community run tournaments.
I did want to interject, free-to-play players that are, or just starting out players, or anybody really, but specifically you free-to-play players. You may not be able to trade your free-to-play cards, but this crafting system, this is being implemented for you. This is your way of getting those cards. This is something you can do, at least right now from how we understand it, as many times in a day as you want. There's no limit. You can turn all these excess cards into new cards on your own terms. You don't have to, wait for a daily to come around. This is being put in the game almost exclusively for you. So I think that's amazing, and as a free-to-play player, I think that's a wonderful addition to the game.
I would like to note that I also have around 30 Deep Branch Prowlers, so I look forward to breaking most of those down for more cards. But that is a lot of good information, and that makes me really excited for the tournaments this weekend, especially, because I can't wait to play in them. But I am really, 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 really excited for the drafts that are coming up, so I'm going to touch on Limited here first for a bit, and with drafting coming out, which faction do you think has the strongest commons? Do you think that will influence what people pick for their factions? And is the allure of heroics too strong?
I think hands down, best commons goes to Necrium. They have all of the fuel cards that will help out a lot of the purposes of higher rarity cards, and even in the lower rarity. So like you have your Death Seekers, your Fellwalkers, and your Vengeful Spirits for good sack cards. So that way you can feed Corpse Crawlers, which are going to be really tough to deal with in Limited. and just a whole slew of just really, really great things. And not only that, but I also tend to think that their higher rarity pool is also really, really good for limited, because it only takes, say, one Grimgaunt to go crazy for you to have like a really, really great game. So that's probably the first and foremost faction I would look at. After that, I would probably go Utera, maybe Tempest, and then Aloyan, just kind of looking at the card pool at the base level, at that common and rare level. Just because I feel like Utera has some better commons and some really great rares too. And kind of, not surprisingly, the Unheroic deck that I tend to favor the most is Necrium Utera, so kind of will make sense, at least to me, to go that route.
Yeah, Necrium commons are very good. They generate a lot of value, and it's going to be very strong in draft. Although I actually think Utera is a close second. It's just got a lot of large cards at the common level, and a lot of them even generate quite a bit of value. So I expect Necrium Utera to be a very common draft combination. So it's a good thing that crafting system is coming into place, because we're going to have a lot of extra deep branch prowlers to be feeding into the forge.
Are you kidding me? Forge Guardians. Forge Guardians are going in there.
Oh, that's true too. Well, actually, funny thing. So I was perusing the commons actually in preparation for this question, and I was surprised at just how many very strong commons there are in the Aloyan faction. And so, I feel like a good Aloyan bomb will be enough to easily force somebody into Aloyan, because Forge Plate, Ionic War Charger, General, these are very, very solid cards that do a lot of stuff on the board and at the common level. And so Aloyan is actually very good. I'm a little on Tempe's, it's an okay pair, just because it does have a removal spell at common, but so many of its other spells and creatures are just kind of a coin flip. It's going to be 50-50 if you're going to open up a playable Tempe's commons. So be wary there.
Yeah, you're stealing my thunder over here, Radrin, making me sad, because, I do believe that currently, just looking at the card pool, Necrium is going to be the easiest to build and most playable. Just all of its commons are generally good. You've got Graveborn Glutton, Fellwalker, Deathseeker, all these cards that have been mentioned before. I'd actually say that Aloyan has a pretty decent fighting chance with Utera at the common level, because some of these cards that people tend to overlook, cards like, Sparkblade Assassin and Vault Technician, are actually very, very strong for a limited environment. Vault Technician is very aggressively statted. He has either same stats or slightly better, if my memory serves, as Graveborn Glutton at pretty much every level, and that's a card that I'm going to pick fairly highly, just because it trades with almost everything.
For me, I definitely agree that Necrium takes the cake. I think that Utera is virtually... I think Utera is almost at Necrium's level. I think it just gives you that very strong pressure, the creatures that build themselves to greatness by themselves. Dryad, Delver, all kinds of cards like that. I'm really, really happy with where Utera is. I honestly, it'll take a really good heroic or legendary from Tempe's to get me to go Tempe's, simply because at the common level, the only cards I really want are Magma Hound and Uranti Bolt. The other cards at common are not... Well, they're not bad, they're just not nearly as exciting to make me want to go into that faction. I feel that, there's a lot of amazing cards in Aloyan. There's also a lot of cards that you're just not going to play if you don't have the cards to go with them as well. So, my picks are pretty much, all else being equal, going to be Necrium Utera as well. But while we're on the subject of draft, I figure we'll go into our last segment for the day, and that is our My Pack Your Pick. So, just as a reminder, we found out, confirmed that you're going to be able to pick any 2 cards from the pack. You don't have to pick one from each faction. So why doesn't everybody go ahead and pick your heroic from these packs? We got Scrapforge Titan, X-Wrath Dreadnought of Varna, Firefist Uranti, and Ferocious Roar. Why don't you go ahead and pick 2, Racecar?
Yeah, so looking at this pack, I would have a really hard time not trying to pick up the Fire Fist Ferocious Roar combo, because right off the bat, that's two cards that I know that are going to work really, really well together. Fire Fist Urantia I also feel is a pretty strong card in a limited environment, again, just because removal is going to be a lot harder to come by. And it also kind of solves that problem for you, giving you some removal in the Fire Fist. So, knowing that, and also knowing the fact that, Utera has a lot of really good buff cards at common, like, Grove Huntress and Rage, those kinds of things, it's probably not going to be too difficult to make something out of that Fire Fist Durante. So, kind of looking out of those four cards, those would probably be my two snap picks.
See, here I'm a little torn. Like, I'm actually not very interested in Zrath. The creatures are all going to be so mediocre of quality that things are going to be trading all the time anyway. So Zrath is actually, I don't think is going to give you as much values as you'd think. I really like Ferocious Roar. I think it's a bomb, and I would snap pick it here. Fire Fist Durante, while I don't want to, I'm just so worried about the Tempest cards that I'd have to pull the deck together, so I'd actually go with the Scrapforge Titan here. It's an absolute bomb. It's going to hit the field. If it hits the field at level 3, it's probably just going to win you the game right there. And that and the good common pool in Aloyan makes me want to take it, especially with the Ferocious Roar, because there are a bunch of common creatures that either have high toughness or also have armor. So Ferocious Roar plus armor equals Happy Nick. Or Rager, whatever.
Well, for me, I actually, looking at these, Scrapforge Titan does have that bomby potential, but, it's not exactly something I want to be spending my early turns, building up. Fire Fist Durante as well. I would love him a lot more if his ability scaled somewhat similarly to, say, Orion Warwalker, where it was deals damage equal to double his attack and then triple his attack, but he doesn't do that, so he makes me very sad sometimes. I would actually want to take Zerath, Dreadnought, Avarna, and Ferocious Roar. Ferocious Roar is just bonkers. The sealed event that was held not too long ago, it was at Common, and it was enough to pull a lot of people into Utera, and it was, in my opinion, dominating the event just because of how bonkers the card is. And Zerath, well, I'm not sure how many zombies or creatures there are that interact well with him. I'm picking him mainly because, there's the potential upside in and of himself, but the commons that you get after playing him, the commons and rares you can get after picking him, are just so good. And I really want to have access to Necreum in this kind of environment.
For me, I'm not taking Ferocious Roar simply because I have 16 of them. So you know what? I'm gonna do it. I want to take the Scrapforge Titan. I think it's a bomb. It's gonna win the turn it's played. Since I'm going the control route and I don't want to be in Tempest, that leaves me with Dreadnought, which I'm not taking for his ability. If I get the zombies, I'll play. It's more that I want to be in Necreum. If I'm gonna be playing Scrapforge Titan, I need to make sure I get to that late game. I'll have Technosmith at common that I will pick up pretty much unanimously, and then I'll have all the removal. Technosmith with Grave Pact is always wonderful. So I'm going to go the control stall route and see if that's even viable in draft. I feel like draft's going to be a little bit more clunky and slow. So that said, we've got our sets of rares for you all. Scar, you said that you were taking Ferocious Roar and Fire Fist Durante, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So for Terra, we have Lightbringer Cleric and Shardplate Delver. And for Tempest, we have Icebound Fortitude and Windcaller Shaman. Go ahead and give us your thoughts on those.
So not really interested in the Tempest cards right off the bat. And the main reason being that I just don't think they're going to fit with at least the first picks that I had. Icebound Fortitude is just, I don't know, I have a hard time, I think, playing that any old time. Windcaller Shaman could have a lot of potential to it, but I haven't seen anything that makes it kind of prove its worth to me yet. Moving creatures around isn't really that big of a deal if I'm just going to try to, sit back and shoot at things. And often in this kind of an environment, the guarantees of having like those creatures that are going to really, really benefit from swinging around is probably not that great. So probably skipping the Tempest stuff. And the reason being is because Lightbringer Cleric and Sharpplate Delver are worth, I think, looking into. Lightbringer Cleric is a really big body with a great ability of keeping you alive longer. Sharpplate Delver also has that potential for being a really big body. And again, just kind of knowing that I have at least one removal spell with the possibility of maybe getting some others in the Tempest pool, just knowing that I can potentially keep him alive long enough to get some of those beginning of turn procs makes him a pretty good choice to me. So I go double Utera on this one.
All right, Radrin, if I remember correctly, you went Firefist Uranti and Scrapforge Titan?
I went Ferocious Roar and Scrapforge Titan.
Okay, I got the Titan right. All right, so the new Aloyan cards that we have to show are Bulwark Bash and Aloyan General, and just a reminder, the Utera cards were Lightbringer Cleric and Shardplate Delver. What are your thoughts?
Well, I really like Aloyan General. I'm probably going to be picking up a lot of lower attack, grindier cards from the Aloyan Commons, and so General is going to allow me to assure that those cards trade favorably, especially with the armor and large defense. So I'll just be able to drop it down and have a couple of favorable trades and be left with a good board presence. Otherwise, I do want to survive to the late game, and while Shardplate Delver can grows very well, I still think that in draft it's pretty answerable, just by throwing a good creature in front of it, or even it just seems very answerable to me. So I would actually go with the Lightbringer Cleric. I know that I have Aurora. I know that I'm probably going to be picking up a few other pump spells to go with my armored dudes and my defensive dudes. So having that extra life bump is really going to help me get to the late game and allow that Scrapforge Titan to really just take over.
All right, Fox, what were your picks again?
Ferocious Roar and Wrath, Dreadnought of Varna.
Alright, so the last ones we're revealing are the two Necrium cards. That's Cull the Weak and Bone Scythe Reaver, two good pieces of removal. And just a reminder on the Utera cards, Lightbringer Cleric and Shardplate Delver.
Alright, so there's some very interesting things here. I do actually heavily consider the Cull the Weak simply because there's a lot of really good cards that have, a low attack and this can kill. Specifically, the Shapers, General, things like that, and that does make me think better of it. However, I would prefer, personally, to take Bone Scythe Reaver and Shardplate Delver, mainly because Shardplate Delver, he grows, and we did take a Ferocious Roar to begin with, and the ability to give, level 3 Shardplate Delver a breakthrough seems extremely powerful to me, and I would like to go sort of the pump spell route, fail the board, keep them going. And Bone Scythe Reaver, I used to think this card was really bad, but that was a long time ago, and hopefully I've been forgiven for it because I love this card now. It has the ability to punish your opponent's draws extremely well, and the fact that it can easily 2-for-1 your opponent, sometimes a little more, is just a great pull for me towards taking it. So I would take the Bone Scythe Reaver and Shardplate Delver.
For me, just as a reminder, I took the Aloyan and Necrium Heroic, Scrapforge Titan, and X-Wrath Dreadnought of Varna. For me, Aloyan General is a guaranteed pickup. I want to play the late game. He's got a great butt. You know how I love my badonkadonks.
Oh my gosh.
I mean,
he saw it coming back.
Can't have a podcast without it now.
Yeah, apparently.
So anyways, I like that he pumps up the Technosmiths that I want to pick up. He makes Death Seekers actually do some damage, making them relevant enough that they want to block them. He just sets up trades that wouldn't be there. So General's going to be an easy pick for me. Cull the Weak, I'm only not picking because in my experience all the cards that I need to kill immediately in this lower format like they're bombs. Like Hellion, Oracle, those are the types of cards that I need to answer immediately, and those are very unlikely to have been gotten. Cards like Shapers, they're not going to have the critical mass of Shapers in order to make me scared enough to take Call of the Week, so I'm going to take Bone Scythe Reaver. I think it's great, especially when I'm playing a faction that can level up cards. Again, I'm all in on getting those Technosmiths. The idea that I'm taking those Technosmiths because of that Scrapforge Titan, that's what I'm aiming for. I'm probably going to take every Technosmith I get until I have at least 3 of them. I don't know what the rules are going to be about having multiple past that, but I definitely want 3 Technosmiths, and if I don't have a play to use this guy, I can just play a Technosmith and level the Bone Scythe Reaver. It'll always keep him relevantly leveled, even when he doesn't have an effect on the board.
Well, alright, that will conclude our edition of My Pack, Your Pick, and that also concludes this week's episode of Player Level 4. I would like to thank Radron and Racecar as well for coming today. It's been really good. Next week, our guest is going to be Minnesota Mike, also known as MN Mike 2002, I do believe, on the show, and he is the writer of The Bracket on ForgeWatch, as well as a frequent host of our community tournaments. So I would just like to say goodbye, everyone. Have a great one, and we will see you all next week.
Good luck in the tournaments this weekend, guys.
See everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Badonka donka 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 donka.